Hello and welcome to this special Hoops and Dreams podcast. We are going to be counting down the top 50 QPR players of all time as voted for by hundreds of QPR fans. We had this open on our forum and we put it on the Loft for Words forum as well. So thank you to everyone who voted. The system it used was a little head-to-head voting system. So you had, for example, it'd say Bobby Zamora or Joey Barton and you chose your favourite one. Then it would say another two and so on and so forth. And in it had 44,000 head-to-head votes have actually helped us to form this list. I'm James. I'm joined by Tony and Steve, two members of Hoops and Dream Forum royalty. So welcome to you both.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
So like I should say, it's not our list. We have formed our own list, but just to help inform our discussion, the list has been formed by the whole group of QPR fans. And we think it's quite a representative list, like I say, with the amount of numbers of votes that we've had. We're going to just count it down, talk through each one. In this part one, we're going to do 50 down to 41, and then there'll be another 4 parts counting down to number 1 over the next few weeks. So do come back and check in on them. And if you disagree with the list, it's not my list. Do comment though on the forum if you want, on the YouTube comments, whatever you want, just to hopefully you enjoy it. It's just a bit of fun to count down these legends. And let's say if you are in the top 50 of QPR legends, you are a legend. There's some big names who haven't made the cut. We'll maybe discuss them at the end. So on with number 50, the first name on the list, and that is a defender who made 221 appearances for QPR, 6 goals, and it's someone who started their career at Chelsea, ended the career at Chelsea, and had 2 spells at QPR in between. I bet there's not many people who've done that, and that is Steve Wicks. Now, I should say that I first went to watch QPR in 1994, so some of these players are before my time. But Tony, Steve Wicks, why is he on the list?
Well, I think we're talking 40 odd years ago now, so sometimes it's kind of hard to remember kind of clearly. But it was an interesting time at QPR when he joined, because the kind of great 75-76 team had just broken up. We just got relegated. And so a new team was being built. And Steve Wicks was a tall, kind of quite good-looking centre half. He was there was a song at the time. I remember, 6'2", Eyes Are Blue. Stevie Wicks is after you. And yeah, he was good in the air. He was kind of no-nonsense centre half, and he formed one hell of a partnership with Bob Hazel, who's coming up next. And yeah, had his own song, so he was a bit of a cult hero at the time.
Steve, was he in your top 50, Steve?
He was number 49 in my list. He was a bit of a hero at the time, because he was a member of our Division 2 winning side, I think back in 82, 83. And as Tony said, he was the big blonde-haired the idol, wouldn't he, of the team, and I think all the young ladies liked him. And I think he was a member of the Losing Milk Cup team as well, wouldn't he, in 86?
Yeah, I think he missed the FA Cup in 82, but I don't think he played then. But he was. I think he might have been out on loan or something. But yeah, he was there in that era.
Yeah, he was good, solid centre half, wasn't he? And I can see why he's in the top 50.
Yeah, well, 221 appearances, it's not to be sniffed at, is it? And I should just say that the stats have come from the QPR Bible, the Gordon Macy Queen's Park Rangers book. So anyone who's misquoting my stats or whatever, that's where I've got them from. Or for modern players, they've come from Soccer Base. I tried to get the most accurate stats I could. Yeah, number 50, Steve Wicks. And now number 49, there's actually a lot of debate about this fellow who's coming up now, because for me, he was one of my first names on my list when I would form a top 50. But for some other people, they were saying, well, why is he even in the discussion? And I was quite surprised by that. I thought most people were a big fan. And that is Mark Bircham. He actually came out on my list as number 12. Maybe that's too high for some people, but I loved the guy. What about you, Steve? Mark Bircham?
Yeah, Mark was he was a QPR fan, wasn't he? And endeared himself to all the fans by dyeing his hair blue and white for the games. If I'm honest, he wouldn't have been in my top 50. I would have had Dave Webb up in my top 50 before I would have had Birch, but he was a solid player. He gave 100%. Not the most skillful of QPR midfielders, but being a fan, I'm not going to criticise him at all. He was a good, solid player, and yeah, I think he ended up. He wanted to be Canadian, didn't he? Didn't want to play for Canada, and when actually he was born in London. So good luck to the guy. I mean, and he's like the rest of us, a fan to this day. So I enjoyed Birch just for his blue and white hair and endearing himself to the fans. He was one of us.
He was one of those guys that absolutely left it all on the pitch every time. And he wasn't, he wasn't Stan Bowles or Adel Tarabt, but he just gave everything. And he loved the club. And the other thing is, he kind of came in at the time when the club was in a really low ebb. And he was part of that group of players, that team that Ian Holloway built, had a lot of QPR fans in and a lot of guys that really would kind of die for the shirt. And I guess he's on the list because of, maybe not because of what he was as a player, but the whole kind of his personality, the way he was kind of affiliated with the club, and the effort he put in.
Yeah, I just personally feel like that era, that team, I loved that team. All the names, there's a few more to come. I don't want to give any spoilers, but he like you say, he just helped to galvanise the team, didn't we? When we've been through a bad time and administration and so on. I don't think he was that limited as a footballer. He did score some good goals from outside the box. I was just actually really surprised by the fact that he seems to polarise a bit of the support. I genuinely thought he'd just be nailed on, but he was in the votes. Some people would have him high, some people would have him not even near the top 50, and that's why he's ended up at number 49.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you look back over the last 30 odd years, we've spent a lot of time in the top divisions, and we've had quite a lot of top division players. So some people will have kind of said, well, is he in the same league literally as those guys?
Yeah.
And some will look at him and say, absolutely love him. He's the sort of guy you definitely want on your team. You hate him if he's on the other team.
Yeah.
So there you go, 49, Mark Bircham, 167 appearances, 7 goals. 48 is someone who had 4 seasons with QPR in the 1970s, 163 appearances, 6 goals. And my question really on this one is, it's Frank McClintock. Why is he still so highly regarded? Is it just because he was part of that 75, 76 side? Or is there more to it after all these years, why he's still making the list? Because he's got less appearances than a few other names.
Yeah, I'd say I'm quite surprised. It probably hasn't done any harm that he keeps getting name checked by Mark Warburton. But I have to say, he'd had an amazing career before he came to QPR. So he was Arsenal's captain when they won the double. And kind of back then, winning the double was something. You didn't have kind of dominant teams like you got now, a couple of dominant teams. And he was well into his 30s by the time he joined. But he seemed to still have the kind of fire. And I mean, there have been loads of interviews with him. He absolutely loved playing at QPR, and he loved being part of that team. And, he was kind of classy, brought experience. And, he wasn't a Singler or Rio Ferdinand, who was kind of here for the payday. He was here to play and to win. And, he was a great part of that team.
Steve, was he in your top 50?
Oh, he was higher than, he was definitely higher than 48. He was up in the number 26 for me. Again, with Dave Webb. You see, if you go back to me being younger than I am now, but he was sort of like in the best QPR team I ever saw play. And, like I was saying about Dave Webb a minute ago, the sort of the pairing that the two of them had was fantastic. And it was so solid, and we'll go on to the other defenders that were in that team, but they were just brilliant, and they really all complemented each other.
Yeah, those two are kind of those two are kind of the finishing touch. So there was great attacking flair in that team. We had 2 fantastic fullbacks, they brought in two very experienced centre halves, and that kind of finished the team off. Yeah, they were great players.
They had a great run in 76, 77 in the cup and in the League Cup, and I think that endeared him to the fans as well, because it was sort of like in those days, it was the same 11 every week.
Yeah,
and wow, it was real success for us. It was as I look back on it, the good old days for those oldies amongst us.
yeah, and actually, it was quite impressive. I mean, you read the stats there: 160 odd appearances in 4 years. He was I don't know what he was, something like 34 when he joined. So if you kind of bear in mind that it was kind of a rough, tough game then, and heavy pitches and all that, that's quite an impressive, record.
Yeah, that'll help you to endear to the fans still, won't it, as well? The fact that you came in and probably never missed many games and so on and so forth. People like that, don't they? Yeah, number 48, Frank McClintock. 47, a Republic of Ireland international, signed from York, left for France later on. A big favourite of our number 49, Mark Bircham, and that is John Byrne. 149 appearances, 36 goals. Now, again, before my time, John Byrne, but he kind of passed me by because I grew up just watching the QPR Golden Goals video that my dad had, and I just watched it over and over. And he was somebody who didn't appear on that too much. It was all Roy Wegerle, Bannister, Trevor Francis, all these people. There wasn't much of him on it. Is he right to be in the top 40, Steve?
Not for me, really, but he's a good player. I mean, and this may seem odd, but his most memorable match for me was when he played for the opposition against QPR. and I think they were in the 4th division, and it was York, I think it was. And he played brilliant, and I think it was on the back of that game that we signed him. So, yeah, he wasn't memorable really while he was with us. I mean, he did score a few goals, but overall for me, as I say, the best game was when he was playing for the opposition.
He had a bit of a partnership with Bannister, but Bannister was always a more prolific goal scorer. Yeah. We had a kind of a succession of these sorts of centre forwards. They weren't kind of big, tall centre forwards. It was more kind of fast and skillful. And we seem to have a kind of bit of a succession of them through the 80s and into the 90s. And he was a very good player, maybe a little bit overshadowed by his partner.
Yeah, he was. He didn't do a lot in the Milk Cup final, did he? I always go back as well at that time to that Milk Cup final against Oxford, and
did anybody?
Didn't play well that day, and he particularly wasn't very good. And disappointing for me.
That was a big disappointment. Yeah,
it's funny because I was saying before, Mark Bircham seemed to polarise opinion, but John Byrne's a little bit like that as well, because when people rate him, some people have got him very, very high, and then others aren't so fussed on him. He seems like, considering they are very different players, they seem to have a very similar way people remember them. But yeah, 47, John Byrne. Number 46, the least appearances so far, 124 appearances, 9 goals, and that is Bob Hazel. Now, a lot of central defenders have come and gone, obviously, who've made a lot more appearances than Bob Hazel. 124 is not that many, really. So my question is, 40 years on, why is he remembered so fondly, Tony?
Well, there are a couple of things about him. So he was a big, solid guy. He was a tough guy. He got sent off a good few times. He was quite got stuck in. But I think probably his finest moment at QPR was the FA Cup semi-final, where it was his job to mark Cyril Regis, who was like the star centre forward, and he played out of his skin. Cyril Regis hardly had a touch the whole game, and that was probably his greatest moment. And then actually in the final itself, he actually got an assist for Terry Fenwick's goal. He was at the front post and kind of nodded it back. And So I think probably partly it's one of those kind of he was a character and everyone loves a character, and partly he was kind of such an integral part of that FA Cup run.
Was he in your top 50?
It's funny I haven't printed out my top 50. He probably would have been, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Well, certainly he would have been above. Yeah, he would definitely have been in.
Steve?
I should have printed mine off before I came.
Happy
Yeah,
memories?
he was number 43 in my top 50, and I always remember him as just being that big, imposing defender. And he was a huge guy, and yeah, he was just one of those guys that he endeared himself to the crowd. And when you do that, you know what you're going to get with him. He's when he went in for the tackle, he went in for the tackle. And
Oh, yeah.
it's a bit different to the sort of central defenders today who are going to play it out from the back. Bob imposed himself, and he let you know that he was playing the game. A good guy.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting because, like I say, 124 appearances in this list. It's not that many, and
Yeah.
some of these modern votes, you're going to get a more modern bias towards it. They're going to remember more recent players. I just thought it was quite interesting that he was still in there and at a good rank at 46. And fair play.
Yeah.
46, Bob Hazel. Number 45, somebody who was playing when I first started supporting QPR, and that is Simon Barker. 376 appearances and 41 goals. A decade with the club, signed from Blackburn, later went on to Port Vale. I have vague memories of Simon Barker. He was just someone who, for me, I think, because he was in that team with Trevor Sinclair, Les Ferdinand when I first came through, Kevin Gallen as well, I loved. He never really stood out that much to me as a young boy watching. What about you, Steve? Simon Barker?
Yeah, no, Simon was good attacking midfielder. I think you've summed up the rest about him, but he was a good player, and he probably didn't stand out amongst the other players that were in the team. And Sir Les, obviously at the time, was the man taking all the plaudits. But no, he was again 100%. And the fact he was with us for 10 years, full credit. And he was always going to be in the top 50 list. I had him at around about number 40. So yeah, he was a good player, good solid player.
To me, he is the player that Luke Amos could be. So he was one of those kind of box to box, always breaking forward. He was with us 10 years. He probably got 7, 8, 9 goals each year from midfield. And yeah, he was never the star on the team, but he was always a really good player.
Yeah.
I think the fact we gave him a testimonial says everything, doesn't it? Because there's not many players who are going to get testimonials for being with the club and being loyal for 10 years.
Yeah, there's not many who've had it in the last 20 years, is there? I don't think of anyone who's had it in that time.
Yeah.
That's right.
So 45, Simon Barker. And next to him in number 44, another midfielder who actually only made a quarter, pretty much, of his appearances, but he's one place higher. And that's Sean Derry, 99 appearances, 1 goal. So I suppose the discussion here is, how is he one place higher than Simon Barker? But I think fans just absolutely love Sean Derry, didn't they? He's the key component in that promotion team. I think if you win a promotion in a team, you're always more fondly remembered. It doesn't matter how many appearances you've made. You seem to always go down in folklore, don't you, if you do that?
I think that's part of it. I also think that having Sean Derry in the team basically gave Adel Tarab the freedom to do what he liked. He was basically the guy who did all the hard yards that Adel didn't. And but yeah, I mean, he was more than that. He was quite I think he was quite a sharp guy. And for me, the one thing I always remember, which was kind of very sad for him really, was that match up at Old Trafford when he was captain, and he got sent off for that dreadful penalty decision.
Oh yeah,
with Ashley Young. And I mean, I'm still fuming about that now. And, just feel for the guy, you're captain of your team, you're playing at Old Trafford, and that happens to you.
Yeah.
Was he in your top 50, Steve?
Oh yeah, definitely. He was there. He wasn't as well. I think we got him at 44 in the QPR fans list, but he was 46 in mine, so there or thereabouts. And yeah, as you were saying earlier, James, it's very much down to the fact he's part of that promotion winning team, and Yeah, he was in the engine room, wasn't he? Him and Fallen, they did the hard work, and Tarak, who we'll talk about again later on, he then put the ball in the back of the net. So it's the combination. It's all those players working together. And sometimes you've got to have that. You've got to have that blend of players. And Sean was a big link in the QPR team at that time.
And I mean, it was a bit of genius from Neil Warnock to bring him and Clint Hill in, because I mean, all the fans at the time, what the hell's he done? Neither of them are any good. Look at the way that turned out.
He was the captain without the armband, wasn't he? Effectively in that team.
Yeah. That's it.
And he was one of those players as well, which I think helps him to be remembered more favourably, in that when we went up, we tried to almost discard him and Clint Hill and people like that. And then the fact that he kind of still fought his way back into the team, and when he played, he was one of the still the best players on the pitch, giving everything to help us avoid relegation. I think that helps his memory as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I think it shows now that you can see that he's gone on to be a manager, and I think he's now a coach at Palace. So he's that sort of mentality, isn't he? He's there. He can, he's got that work ethic that you like to see from some of your midfielders, and he certainly had that.
Yeah. Yep. So number 44, Sean Derry. Number 43 is someone who actually got promoted with Sean Derry in 2011, but less probably memorable in that team. Is someone who actually was our 2006 Player of the Year, 2 spells at the club, and actually was promoted from Division 2 to Division 1, and then left, and then came back to get promoted to the Premier League with us. Not many people have probably done that with QPR, get promoted to 2 different divisions, and that's Danny Shitu. 190 appearances, 17 goals, pretty good for a centre half. But obviously, given the size of him, he was a threat. I really liked Danny Shitu when I was, again, he's part of that Mark Bircham, Ian Holloway team. He was a man mountain, wasn't he? Absolutely unbelievable. His second spell wasn't quite as successful for him. I know he was promoted, but he didn't really nail down a place again, did he? But in that first spell, it was quite clear that he should have been playing at a higher level when he was with us, and eventually, obviously, he did move on.
And he also played for Nigeria, didn't he?
Yeah. But he was. I just don't know if there's been another defender really built like him since. He's unbelievable.
He was absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about Bob Hazel being a big bloke, but Danny Shitu was built on a whole different scale. Yeah.
I remember his run used to be so strange, because he always had like he got when he got going, he was really fast, but he had to kind of get his legs going to speed up.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about him was that he was one of 2 players that was actually bought for the club, and I think they also paid his wages by the Winton brothers.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, obviously the club was in dire straits when he joined, and they kind of they actually paid to buy him and paid his wages. Bizarrely, the other guy I seem to remember was called Doodoo.
Yeah, Doodoo.
Doodoo, which is couldn't make that up, could you?
No, I think they shelled out about £250,000 for him as well. So, not a small amount of money. I think the 2 brothers, did they work in the clothing trade or something, if I remember? But what a gesture.
Yeah.
A good player for you, Steve?
Yeah, he was, as we were talking about earlier with Bob Hazel, another big, honest defender who left his mark, but he was quality as well. You knew that he was going to get sold, and when he went to Watford, because I think they got about 1.5 million, 1.6 million at the time, something like that. They made him, or he made the club a bit more money as well. So yeah, he was very good, but too good probably for us at that time.
Yeah. Like I say, I remember thinking at the time, like, how is no one else buying him? Because he was just dangerous in both boxes, wasn't he? Amazing for you to defend, and was such a threat at the other end. In some ways, he's got 17 goals. I'm surprised in some ways in 190 matches he's never had more, because every time he went up for a corner, you probably thought he was going to score.
Yeah.
So 43, Danny Shitu. Number 42, another one who split a little bit of opinion on the forum when the votes were going in, and that's Ian Holloway. Because some people are saying he shouldn't be in there as a player. Is it because people remember him as a manager and so on and so forth? But he did make 170 appearances in the early 90s in one of our strongest ever QPR teams, so that shouldn't be sniffed at. He was a key component of that team, wasn't he? What do you think of that, Steve?
Yeah, no, Ian was, again, he was another 100%. He came to us, didn't he, from Bristol Rovers? I think he was one of Jerry Francis' first signings when they brought Jerry Francis back. And Jerry knew what he was going to get from him. The thing with Holloway was he was one of those tenacious midfielders, was going to work his socks off. And every club needs one. And if you don't have one, you miss something. And it's the type of player that Holloway was. I mean, and he was a character, wasn't he? He's the sort, and we found out when he was a manager, some of his stories are hilarious. And he's the sort of guy that everyone's against us, and he builds the team up. He gets the players playing for him, and you can see that whether he was a player or a manager, that you wanted to play with him and you wanted to play for him. Probably you're not going to say he was the most skillful player, but workman-like, 100% grafter.
Yeah, it's like what we were saying with Sean Derry, isn't it?
Yeah, very similar. And I think Ian Holloway says himself that he knows he wasn't one of the most skillful players in that team, but his job was to allow the others to play.
Yeah,
I think to be fair, he's doing himself down a little bit there. He wasn't a bad player at all. Yeah, I mean, he was playing in the top division every week for a good team, so he obviously was no mug. But yeah, he was, and I'm sure he is higher than he would have been because of particularly that first manager spell.
Yeah. Whether he'd have been in the top 50 without that, we'll never know. I guess it's just it's Ian Holloway as a whole, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, precisely. And you've got to love the guy.
Yeah. 42, Ian Holloway. So the last one on this first part of 10, number 41, is the youngest player in the top 50. It's the current player in the top 50, and that's Ilias Chair. Like I say, the lot of votes. I wasn't sure whether any current players would make it. We had 44,000 people doing the head-to-heads. He's there, 41. For me, he'd be in the list at this point. I'd just like him to be here for another year or two, and he'll go past 200 appearances and things like that. And I think he really, really will make his mark in QPR folklore. Currently on 150 appearances.
Really, as many as that?
Goals. Yeah, 150, 23 goals. He's just had his best goal-scoring season with 9, when he was a bit off for some of the season, people would argue. So he's always improving, and he's 41 already. So fair play to him. What about you? Would you have him in your top 50, Tony?
Yeah, I would. I love him. I think he's brilliant. I think, I suppose he hasn't come on quite as much as I thought he would this season. And he's obviously been outshone for a good part of the season by Chris Willett. But the two together are a great partnership. He works hard. He's very skillful. He has got an eye for goal. Yeah, I think I hope we can hang on to him for a while yet. And I think he could be. If we can hang on to him for a bit longer, he could be working his way up this list. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, your thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, well, he's another number 10, isn't he, in our long list of decent number 10s that we've had, and he's sort of like taken over from Ezzy, and he's done the business. I mean, I'm surprised he's proved to young lads who are small that you can make it at a football club, and a guy like him with plenty of skill can make it at a top level club, and he's still just starting out, and I think he's going to be so much better, as you guys have said. I hope he stays with us for a few more seasons yet, but I think he's destined for better things. He just has to learn to not shoot on sight a goal, when there's players in better positions, but he's getting there. I had him at number 38. I had him a little bit higher in my list, but he's a good player, one for the future, and he could even, he would probably go higher than number 38 for me in the future if he stays a few more years.
Yeah, hopefully. If we were doing this list in a few more years, we've got to hope that he's higher up the list, and that means he's stayed with us, and we've had an amazing player on our hands for a few more years, haven't we? But yeah, 41, Ilias Chair, the youngest player actually since Adel Taarabt to get to 150 matches. So that's no mean achievement, and neither is being number 41 on this amazing list. And that is where part 1 ends. We'll be back with another 10. We'll do 40 down to 31 in the next part. So join us for that. Of course, like I said at the start, get on our Hoops and Dreams forum. It's free. Share your views. If you think this is a load of nonsense and the names are wrong, then you put your post on there and tell us who would be in your top 50. I'd like to thank Tony and Steve for joining me. They'll be back for part 2 and hope you will be too. Come on, you R's.
We know who we are. You know who we are. We are QPR.